All right, this is Dr. Phil Chavez of the Men's Academy, and thank you for joining the College Man Hack, where we cut into the issues that matter. And on this program, what we're aiming for is to discuss concerns that guys in their college years and a little bit beyond about life, faith, family, work, and other matters. And so we have mostly the men here from the Cal State Fraternity of Dominguez Hills. And thank you, brothers. And Jason, again, as always, I'm grateful for you organizing the men and helping me spearhead this program, and take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Chavez. So the purpose of today's webinar is to focus on the theme of forgiveness and also a way to kind of get that peace of mind and peace of heart. With everything happening in this world, especially with this quarantine, the protest for the justice of George Floyd and everything. And, there's a lot of mixed opinions, a lot of, clashing between people. But I think definitely what's one part that we're forgetting is like forgiveness, right? In the sense of forgiveness within our hearts and forgiveness towards others. And I think maybe despite your spiritual background, whatever you may have, I think forgiveness is one of the greatest things that we can do in order to move on. Of course, that takes a lot of action, that takes a lot of time, but this is what I kind of want to focus this webinar and we can talk about.
Okay, good. All right, I could make some opening comments, but would any of you guys like to talk about a certain trial or even yourself, Jason, or a certain aspect of that, which might be the most, like to boil this down, what might be the most troubling at this time, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think there is, so I'm gonna talk in a very general sense because
okay, that's fine.
I know that it kind of affected me for quite a while.
Okay.
I think in a sense, I couldn't ever forgive myself, like in high school I want to say that I wasn't able to do it at my fullest, right?
Yeah.
And, it kind of made me compare. And while it's a very different aspect, like I don't feel like anyone has went against me. I don't feel like, in that sense, but rather like, oh my gosh, like there's a moment when in high school and even college years in which I would look at myself and say like, I'm not doing this or that. And in a sense, like that mindset would tell me like, you're not forgiven, like you're not doing enough. So I think when I started to reach out to the Lord above and ask him for insight, I think I have to be a little bit more forgiving of myself, of like who I am, of what I have done at least, and who I have with me. I think that's what really pushed me forward and really, I guess, changed my view in life. Like even with this whole thing happening, I think I even find this quarantine as a half blessing too, because yes, I haven't been able to go out, see my friends or hang out with my girlfriend, but definitely a lot of it is I love a lot of time for myself. I've definitely been praying a lot more. Okay. And I think I really feel peaceful. I mean, despite the gym, I really wish the gym was open, but I think everything's been a lot better of my overall mental well-being. And
Well, good deal, Jason. Yeah, thank you for mentioning all that. It's interesting. I think there are specific, how would I say, dynamics with men and forgiveness. And I hope we could talk about those and bring those up. But you make a very good point. When it talks about that journey of forgiveness, in some way it's almost impossible if you haven't really forgiven yourself for the things that you've done, or rather the things you've omitted to do, right? Mm-hmm. And like you say, not staying on top of maybe your high school work or doing all that you could have accomplished, in the past. In fact, in this way, I find that men have a lot of regrets. Maybe we can go on that on another program or touch that part of the program here, is that men have a lot of regrets for what they did not accomplish or what they did do. So in the sense of like forgiveness, there's a certain regret there, which also has to be let go of, right? What's interesting, initially when you were mentioning about forgiveness and of offenses and maybe other things that affected you, one of the important things I learned, brothers, is that, even as Christians, we're to navigate life from the inside out. It's ourselves, our persona, our moving in Christ, by which we are called to be a light to the world, right? And bring glory to God by who we become. And of course, the teaching I do on manliness is to help you guys become as best men as you can, so that you can affect others well, right? Be good husbands, fathers, neighbors, just affect all those in your arena, and also give God glory, because he wants us to become everything we're meant to be, right? And so if it's about it's about a transformation of character, specifically moving in Christ, then it's easy to work through this, because for this simple reason, if we don't orient ourselves that way, if we don't orient ourselves in light of we're to move forward in a personal transformation to touch the world around us for God's glory, then what we're going to do, we're going to move in a mode by which we're going to estimate how good our life is based upon how good things are going on around us, right? So life will be good when everything is going good. So life will be good, when you shape up and, your wife, your girlfriend, your parents, your family, when they start to get it, move in a better direction, stop being less annoying, stop asking you for money, then that's what life will be, where it's supposed to be. And so that's navigating life by circumstance. And so that never brings happiness and never brings peace. Why is that? Because first of all, there's going to always be circumstances affecting you guys, right? In fact, it's kind of, as I say, there's always a constant, as I say, one of my pillars in my work on the pillar of journey, life is always combat. There's always something to confront, a trial to face. There's never that point in life where we just start, there's a way we think in life. Well, we just work really, really hard and life's going to be tough for a while. Then all of a sudden it's going to level out and everything's going to be good and cool. But that's not reality. Reality is a life-going struggle or working through struggles. And a big part of that, it's not just struggles with ourselves, but struggles that come from us from the outside. And we often think as men, hey, when these struggles stop coming, then life's going to be good, as I mentioned. But if you make it about others from the outside, then you're going to find yourself always taking offense and needing always to move in forgiveness. But you see, if it's about me moving from interiorly outward, as we say, in Christianity, the Christ within me, who moves outward, the Christ within me that shines, then yeah, other things can be maybe affecting me in a sense, but it's not like I assess my life like, oh, how am I offended? Or how am I being treated? No, it's about how am I treating others? The orientation is the other way. And so when the orientation becomes that way, it's about not looking for offense, but about seeing life in terms of what proceeds in my light to others. Then we don't have to live so much in seeing how we've been disaffected, and therefore not live in forgiving mode. Does that make sense? Any guys have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think that what you're saying is very true. I mean, that's important for our overall development as a man, and
very good.
Because
yeah,
and I think that I think one of the reasons that men struggle before this is because we actually believe that we don't have any more struggle.
Yeah.
And I think
when you say that, at what point do you think we have no more struggle? At what point, or at what episode in life do you think?
I think it's when someone gives us too much. Like for example, if our parents are continuously helping us, and I understand it's with great motive why they're helping us financially and whatnot, but I feel like it can also create this sort of state within ourselves that we become kind of reliant on that,
Yeah.
And it's not
so comfortable, we become so self-absorbed, then we measure life about how well we're being taken care of.
Yeah.
That's where you're going? Okay. Well said.
Yeah, definitely.
No, Angel, that's really important what you're bringing up, because along the same lines was what I was saying is, when we're so served in being comfortable in life, especially in adolescence, and I think that's the way it should be when we're children, right? Parents protect us, they give us what we need. And as a little child, you're filled with needs, and needs need to be met. Now, parents discipline you, but they basically want to discipline you so you behave right. But when you become an adolescent especially, that's when they need to in some way take you out of your comfort zone, starts challenging you a little bit more in terms of what they expect from you. And you know, to try to, that's when you as a man too, we're supposed to be making our own way, earning our own keep, and not necessarily depending on others so much for a number of things. But as you also put it, you know, as fully grown men, one of the reasons we seek to be that fully integrated man is so we can serve others, right? And so if we don't have that posture and the disposition of serving, then it's going to be the opposite. Our whole disposition in life is going to be measured by, gee, how well am I being served today, right? And that's not a place where we want to get. And so this is one of the reasons why it's so important to put ourselves in a position while we're doing this today, is because we're learning what it means, or growing in what it means to be a fully integrated man, so we have something to serve with. And I think this is one of the reasons why some men, and you guys can make your comments on this, this is the reason why some men have a hard time getting to that position of service. It may not always become because they're kind of spoiled or something and self-centered, but oftentimes men don't see themselves moving in service because they don't feel well formed themselves. They feel a little lost and unnavigated, right? And when you're lost and unnavigated, you tend to see how the world is affecting you and not where you're coming from. Again, we always want to move. I mean, we gain maturity and you learn lessons from me, and so you receive that. But you want to get to the point where you're able to give all the good that you've received, right?
Right. Dr. Phil Chavez, would you say that it's about being more proactive versus reactive?
Okay, that's one way of putting it. Yeah.
Because generally, a lot of people are very reactive towards their environment, but they aren't about creating solutions, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, I'm not sure how to comment on that more other than, yeah, proactive. I guess in the sense that, you know, when we are active or proactive, as you put it, you know, it's important that we be that to achieve certain ends. But when we really serve others, it's not that we just want to be active. We always want to keep their good in mind. And so a big part of growth is developing the good in us so we can do good in others. Service is about accomplishing what is good for another person, right? What is truly good. That's true service. And so this is why, you know, it's important in life when we seek our objectives. In fact, I had a discussion about this recently with another guy, is that, you know, there's a lot of self-improvement stuff and a lot of how-to books out there, right? How-to manuals. And of course, we men want to know how to do things. That's true. We want to understand, you know, what works the best, what principles we want to apply, you know, how to move forward in a certain issue or problem or struggle. But ultimately, what we want to do is, in whatever effectiveness we have, we want to make sure whatever we do is genuinely accomplishing the good of others. In other words, if it's not about the good of others, then it becomes about the good of ourselves. And sometimes we'll serve others just to make people feel good, just so we could feel good about ourselves, right? Or we're going to not easily see the service of others because we're not really oriented toward their own good. It's kind of like we're oriented toward our own good. So yes, we be proactive, but it's not in that venture to be proactive about filling ourselves up as opposed to reactive. I guess I just want to make that point. Yeah, it's when we can really see understand what is truly good for another. And of course, we often will see that when we find what we received is good. You know, you guys, you have certain skills that you've learned, certain things that you've come to know and to be adept in, and that you believe, hey, this is a good that I can give others. And so we want to give that. And so, yeah, it's important in this whole journey that when we shine, that we really recognize what is good for others. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good to be able to touch on that, especially during these times, because like we have seen like cases of police brutality where maybe certain cops, because I don't believe all cops, but certain cops have maybe wanted to serve themselves, you know, or serve a certain feeling within themselves. And I think that might be in relation to believing that they might be serving the people, when in reality it might just be something that they want to fill themselves with, you know.
Okay, very good. You know, thank you for saying that. And first of all, I want to preface that with, like, this program isn't about assessing these problems, right? There's better commentators out there. However, I do want to get to that because I think this is important. That I've heard of testimonies, and I know of testimonies where it is true what you say, that there are some policemen who move into that field and find themselves, whether they intended to or not initially, are serving themselves. But I find that the overwhelming amount of policemen are usually pretty good and have a spirit of really serving and sacrificing for others. And I think that's shown kind of in common experience. But it is true. It's easy to get into a situation where we're serving others, or we're serving ourselves instead of others. And you'll find usually the sad thing is, and maybe I'll just say this at the outset, what I find in some way very hurtful too is that a lot of people in civil service, in political service, in military service, something about the systems, you know, gets them caught into being self-served instead of serving others. You know, we used to use that term, going into the military, as going into the service, right? And we talk about civil service, and we talk, you know, politicians used to really enter politics, and I think they still do. They enter politics with an aim to really fulfilling what they see as good for the community. And what happens, and this is a lesson to all of us, I really believe the majority of politicians, the majority of policemen, the majority of those in civil service, when they enter, really do have an intention of doing good and fulfilling the good of others. The problem is they can easily, being maybe say comfort and spoiled in their position sometimes, they could find themselves self-serving. Now, I know sometimes when I see some police brutality, one thing I can't help is that some of these policemen in themselves, if their souls are not at peace and they're kind of angry, a lot of policemen go through divorces, a lot of them are alcoholics. So a lot of them are just, they've got some problems, right? And I think a lot of these anger things come out from those problems, and a lot of these results and abuse come out for these problems. Again, I don't want to go too far into that, but this is a lesson for all of us, guys, as in doing the good and service, is that we stay focused and oriented such that we really are to accomplish the good of others and not the good of ourselves. You know, men oftentimes will get married. You know, you guys, when you look at your girlfriends, let's be honest. Of course, I know this when I was your age. I was looking at girlfriend as, how is she going to benefit me? It wasn't about how I could serve her, right? I mean, as we think about having a girlfriend, it's just like, yeah, how much can you bring into my life to make it better? And so there's so many avenues. Of course, that's an important one, you know, when it comes to relationships, but there's so many avenues by which we can enter, often for self motives. And sometimes, you know, sometimes we can have a lot of good intentions with girls too, but too in relationships as they get going, sometimes we can lose sight that, hey, we're here to continually serve in that relationship. You know, guys, you'll find yourselves in a marriage someday where, hey, it's going to be, you know, life with your girlfriend, your fiance, and your wife in the beginning may have been good and smooth, but you really find yourself in a situation where there's a lot of challenges, and it's really about her good over yours. When it becomes about children, it becomes, one guy puts it, becomes from about us to about them, you know. So it is an ongoing struggle to keep your sonar active about doing the good and fulfilling the good of others.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to like sort of add upon like the whole theme over this. I think one thing that's our biggest downfall, and maybe like there's so many, I guess, ways of viewing human nature, but it's our flawed human nature in a sense, right? Like I think
Yeah.
the way that, in my opinion, and I guess especially on biblical influences and like everything that I read through scripture is like, the fall of man came from human nature, like our selfishness. And I think that's like in part, like it really has influenced a lot of people's actions, and I guess doesn't like prevents us from forgiving or even moving forward. It's like, how do we, I guess in a sense, like how do we recognize that, and how do we sort of like continue to put that down, like rather than, I guess in a sense, like I'm not saying put down your human nature, definitely not, but like kind of recognize that more often, and like kind of take away that selfishness and rather recognize the whole overall situation, like you said, in order to serve others. Yeah.
Yeah, well said, Jason. Yeah, how do we keep that human nature in check and kind of always keep that vision for the service and the good of others? It's interesting. Every man has to move forward with wherever he's at, right? Wherever he's at in life, life is about and needs to be about, okay, what is it that brings me to be a better man, better husband, better father in the next level? What more can I do? And I think that as long as you're living a life where you're very aware that, yeah, I am to serve the good of others, and that the better I become as a person and as a man, the better that I can become, for the sake of others. Yeah, it's interesting. That's why it's important, for men, when they're in fraternity, and we'll have to talk about this, Jace, because I'm not sure about how Phi Beta Kappa handles this, but in terms of what you do for service, a lot of men's groups, it's and a lot of, yeah, men's groups generally, and I'm not talking about just college men's groups, but men's groups anywhere. It is important. Now, some men's groups, especially probably the majority, as I think about it, at least Christian or Catholic men's groups, are usually for like fellowship and Bible study or studies on the faith and whatnot, which they share and come together, and that's all good. But everything that you do pretty much should lead you to a servant's heart, to wanting to fulfill and accomplish the good of others. This is why when you guys get together in fraternity, there is the case where, guys like yourselves, and I know you don't take offense at this, you need a lot of strong ongoing formation, right? But you can't make it just about that. It's important that your formation and defining becoming the better man, which is where I'm trying to help you and giving you ideas how to get there. That's all to lead for you guys to be creative on how to serve others. In fact, in some way, that's what we're called to do in service of others. We're called, I find, to be very creative. And as we're talking about this, one of the things too is that we got to be careful also, and I don't think I'm getting off point when I say this, is to, when it comes to serving others, is to try not to think so institutional in everything that we do. In other words, to fulfill the good of the others is that we think, oh, well, let's find out some big need out there and try to meet it, right? A lot of the good that you need to accomplish is the good in your own families, is for the good of your next door neighbor, is for good of those around the corner from where you live. Instead of thinking about institutional good, where we got to go out there and, solve hunger or solve this kind of cosmic problem that, yeah, we're supposed to be working for the common good. But I'll tell you what, you're never going to really achieve or really reach any success in helping out the common good unless you help those out around you. In some way, I don't think God blesses if we try to do great works out there and doing good for others out there when we aren't attending to the good and serving others who are just around us. Does that make sense? And so a lot of times too, you guys will hear this a lot when you see in college, and this, I don't ever like to be derogatory or harsh on others or judgmental. But you ever notice, because this is a common trend, I'll mention this isn't to be uncharitable, that you ever notice a lot of your professors and in college life, a lot of writings about this justice that needs to take place in the world, right? But all the things that need to change and all the things that need to be transformed and all these major problems that, you know, we've got to attend to. But you'll rarely hear about your professors or all these other people who want to change the world, so to speak, with all these agendas. You rarely hear about how they're called to touch the neighbor, you know, in the person in their own neighborhoods, and how that is primally important. In fact, they, you know, a lot of times when you think about hearing about benevolence and doing things, it's always for some big cosmic purpose, which in some ways out of our grasp, and in some way that's also safe. It's very safe to talk about, you know, that this needs to change or that needs to change, but it's very unsafe to talk about the needs of your neighbor, because you know what that means? It means you got to do some hard work to help your neighbor. And sometimes we don't want to do that. We'd rather not, we ignore those needs that are right next door, and yet talk about some theoretical or move for some higher level need out there, which in great measure, a lot of us can't do much about, but we can do a lot about helping our families, our neighbors, and supporting them. What do you guys think?
I think that you may definitely make a great point, but I wouldn't necessarily discredit the fight for a bigger, well, like the quote unquote, like the cosmic purpose, you know?
Yeah.
Like I still think that's important, but I can definitely see how there is there's a lack of importance when it does come to the conversations of supporting like our own families, our own neighbors, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that if someone did want to change something that was like that cosmic type of level, it would start with the neighbors, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
Because
yeah,
at the end of the day, when you build your neighborhood and you're creating a nice community, that's when things will then become a community issue, not just a one person, you know?
You know, they used to say that, I heard this one saying, you know, she who rocks the cradle rules the world. In other words, the mother stays at home raising her children well. She's the one who's really bringing about a great difference in the world, right? And I find too that what you say, Angel, is very important in this sense that, yeah, when you get in a position where you're serving those around you and your mindset is to really help out your local community, then you're able to really see the good beyond that for what it is. You know, a lot of times, guys, we could talk and move in a way that we could be helping other families and not our own. And so we could be very, very blinded oftentimes in our service for others, unless those we see are local to us are served first. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because at the Casa Dominguez Hills, I mean, luckily I've been able to put a lot of service hours when it came to inspiring a lot of the students there with Peace Club.
Good.
And of course the fraternity. But now since I'm no longer going to be returning to the school, I have my eyes set on City Hall, and I'm creating different like youth leadership groups, and I'm essentially helping a city council and trying to get certain things passed to essentially teach the kids leadership. I think that leadership in general is not widely taught in the K through 12 system, you know?
Yeah, that could be. Though leadership, though, is somewhat, I think what you're saying is right. But at the same time, I think, you know, leadership, when we talk about serving others, you know, it's often, that seems to be like the first thing that comes up. You know, leadership is always the first thing that comes up when it comes to success. You know, the real successful man is the great leader. And there are a lot of, I guess, leadership workshops out there. Yeah. Remember that when you contribute this, Angel, this thought comes to mind. I'm not saying it's the most important, but when you teach these kids on how to lead, teach them in some way also the importance of following. Because find if we're not good followers, and we don't learn to heed the advice and the counsel and the direction of those who are our superiors, those leading us, we never really learn what it is to lead others. You know, good followers make good leaders.
Yes.
So figure out how to be creative.
I definitely, you're 100% right. I think that the greatest leader is the greatest follower.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about that because typically the greatest leader follows the mission the best, you know, because they're essentially leading by the example.
Right.
And what we want to do is, of course, make great followers so that, I mean, once we're no longer on the earth, they can take the torch, you know?
Sure. That's right. Yeah. When that's a good connection. When we're a good follower, if this is what you're saying too, or implying, when we're a good follower, it means we're in some way a really good example, right? We're a model. And I never thought of it in terms of a model being just modeling, in some way, just being a follower of what he learned is right and true. So that's a very good point, because we have to talk about models all the time. And we hardly ever hear about models being in the mode of a follower. But a model is simply following what he knows to be true and wants to be that out in the world. That's really cool. I'd never made that connection. It's a simple connection too. Well,
yeah, it's
very good.
John Maxwell, I believe, talks about it all the time, and I know that he has a lot of religious experience too. I believe he was a pastor, but he's a huge leadership guru. Great man.
Yeah, he's I don't know how he's done all the book writing he's done. He's probably got at least 50 books? Probably at least.
Oh yeah.
They're not necessarily all large, but he has at least 50 separate books. Yeah. So Norbert, do you have any comments or questions or anything you want to say or bring up before we close? If you can pass.
No specific questions. Yeah, it's just a lot to take in, because this is essentially just a lot. Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
Yeah. What would you say in this session that has probably moved you the most, or has gotten you to think the most?
Especially when you're talking about the whole helping out your neighbors kind of first, or your family, and then it's kind of like moving out from there. And I think that, and for sure the service part, the serving, and kind of how it falls into fulfillment.
Okay.
The point where you made where it was like, oh, when people often find themselves lost, and so like I think when they're lost, you know, they don't really have anything to follow, and it just kind of like clicks, you know.
Okay.
And it's just a reminder for me for when I do get lost.
Okay.
So yeah, sometimes I do fall out of my whole vision for myself, and I think that with kind of how people are in a sense like self-serving, that's where things like become pretty corrupt, like for man.
Yeah.
I think it's just like a lot, you know. Like this is a whole topic like I gotta think about.
Yeah. There's a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Well, guys, let's wait for the next session. We'll continue the discussion, and we'll close at this point, because I know we want to close this one session out a little bit earlier. So let's close with a prayer, right?